Would you guys be interested in hearing former President Bill Clinton's thoughts on NATO expansion?
Yes.
Would I?
Okay.
What
All
else
right.
do I want in this fight?
Yeah. I was about to throw myself on a train track until you suggested this.
I got this article because Matt, you posted it this week, and it was like, this is Bill Clinton writing in The Atlantic. I tried to put Russia on another path. And, your point about this is this is his version of the O.J. Simpson book, If I Did It.
Yeah. This is him going, if I didn't do it.
If I didn't do it, yeah.
If I had really good intentions, imagine that.
So he says, my policy was to work for the best while expanding NATO to prepare for the worst. Bill Clinton writing in the pages of The Atlantic. It begins, when I first became president, I said I would support Russian President Boris Yeltsin in his efforts to build a good economy and a functioning democracy after the dissolution of the Soviet Union. So he's supporting Boris Yeltsin's effort to build a good economy and a functioning democracy.
Well, mission accomplished.
Yeah, way to go, dude.
Well, one of the strongest economies I've ever seen. And, so certain unfair people would say that Bill Clinton and Bob Rubin and Larry Summers and everyone else, Bill Broder, all these people, that their actions in this country actually reflect how Bill Clinton treats women, which is just repeatedly penetrating them unconsensually. But neither are true. He's done for the economy of Russia what he has done for every woman he has met.
He says, yes, I would to build a good economy and a functioning democracy after the dissolution of the Soviet Union. But I would also support an expansion of NATO to include former Warsaw Pact members and post-Soviet states. My policy was to work for the best while preparing for the worst. I was worried not about a Russian return to communism, but a return to ultranationalism, replacing democracy and cooperation. Replacing democracy and cooperation with the aspirations to empire, like Peter the Great and Catherine the Great. I didn't believe that Yeltsin would do that, but who knew who would come after him?
I think you did. You did because you guys picked him, actually. Yeah.
If Russia stayed on a path towards democracy and cooperation, we would all be together in meeting the security challenges of our time. Terrorism, ethnic, religious, and other tribal conflicts, and the proliferation of nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons. If Russia chose to revert to ultranationalist imperialism, an enlarged NATO and a growing European Union would bolster the continent's security. Near the end of my second term in 1999, Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic joined NATO despite Russian opposition. The alliance gained 11 more members under subsequent administrations, again, over Russian objections. Lately, NATO expansion has been criticized in some quarters for provoking Russia and even laying the groundwork for Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. The expansion certainly was a consequential decision, one that I continue to believe was correct.
Ignoring the insane who knows who would come next. The fear of ultranationalism in Russia specifically leading to military belligerence. I mean, it is useless bringing up what people fucking forget because it's everything. It's everything that was even 2 weeks ago, much less something that was, over 20 fucking years ago. But Russia's incursion into Chechnya both times was broadly supported by the West. Tony Blair has made several speeches and public statements saying, you know how we prevent Russia from backsliding? We help them just wantonly kill Muslims. So that was never a fucking fear.
It goes on here, Sarah. As United Nations ambassador, sorry, Felix, I can't get over I can't get over wantonly.
What is it supposed to be?
Wantonly. Wonton is like the Chinese food.
Who cares?
I think Felix is hungry. That's what that means.
No, I just ate. This is like the 700.
Was it Chinese food?
No. I don't eat China. I only eat that on special occasions because they put the wrong
Christmas.
In that. Yeah. I can't I typed in virgin boy egg into Grubhub and I got arrested. I'm not doing that again. That's my favorite food from China. I did a little trick or treating of my own last year and I was going door to door asking if anyone's son would pee on my egg. And no one did. So no, I had Greek where they do that for free.
He goes on, as United States ambassador and later Secretary of State, my friend Madeleine Albright, who recently passed away, was an outspoken supporter of NATO expansion. So were Secretary of State Warren Christopher, National Security Advisor Tony Lake, his successor Sandy Berger, and 2 others with firsthand experience in the area. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, John Saakashvili, who was born in Poland to Georgian parents and came to the U.S. as a teenager. And Deputy of State Strobe Talbot, who translated and edited Nikita Khrushchev's memoirs while we were housemates at Oxford in 1969 and 1970.
Okay, I would love to talk about all these people that like Bill Clinton Eiffel Towered on a plane with, but you said Deputy of State.
Boom.
I did.
Yeah,
Fucking roasted.
You did say deputary.
That isn't even a word.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
The word I fucked up was also a word in the other way.
Very delicious, honestly.
Yeah.
Can't stop thinking about wontons now.
So it's how should I say it?
Wantonly.
Wantonly. It's like the same word. Like people will know. People use context clues.
I'm
It's
sorry.
like there.
I'm sorry. I've been hosted by my own Wait, okay, no, all right, I'll stop. At the time, I proposed NATO expansion. However, there was a lot of respected opinion on the other side. The legendary diplomat George Kennan, famous for advocating the policy of containment during the Cold War, argued that with the fall of the Berlin Wall and the dissolution of the Warsaw Pact, NATO had outlived its usefulness. The New York Times columnist Tom Friedman said Russia would feel humiliated and cornered by an enlarged NATO. When it recovered from the economic weakness of the last years of communist rule, we would see a terrible reaction. Mike Mandelbaum, a respected authority on Russia, thought it would be a mistake too, arguing that it wouldn't promote democracy or capitalism. I understood that renewed conflict was a possibility, but in my view, whether it happened depended less on NATO and more on whether Russia remained a democracy and how it defined its greatness in the 21st century. Would it build a modern economy based on human talent in science, technology, and the arts, or seek to recreate a version of its 18th century empire fueled by natural resources and characterized by a strong authoritarian government with a powerful military? I love the idea that that they would really they really wanted Russia to build a modern society and an economy that could compete on a global stage.
How were they supposed to do that when we dismantled their entire fucking like infrastructure and sold it off to the highest bidder? How was that supposed to happen?
Yeah,
like,
and
they didn't get enough. They didn't get a Marshall Plan. Like they asked for one, and we told them to fuck off.
Yeah, and if we're being honest about what Clinton and several underlings and allies did to Russia in the 90s, allowing them to come back in any form, because it's obviously like still not a fucking great place to live, though it is improved in standards of living from the 90s in a lot of ways. Allowing them to come back with a world economy that has any leverage on Western Europe and some on the United States is a catastrophic L. Like fucking that country up so bad and then letting them have any leverage on you in the future is probably the absolute worst way you could have done things. And
yeah,
that
they
is
fucked it up
kind
so
of
bad.
how you do it. It's like that. I mean, like I think everyone listening is at this point pretty skeptical about Trump Russia bullshit. Despite the fact that it's a great avenue for anti-corruption on the left. But like, you know, as we've said, like with that, if they did steal a US presidential election after what we did to them, you just got to take that. You just got to fucking hold that one. You've got to take that one on the chin. That's like you ran up behind a guy who's half your size, hit him in the head with a fucking brick, and he's permanently disabled. He's in a wheelchair, and he like fucks your wife and burns your house down. Well, that's really on you, isn't it?
Fair enough.
Yeah. How'd that happen?
And also, it's like it's or would they want to create an 18th century empire fueled by natural resources and characterized by a strong authoritarian
You mean the
government?
thing they have? what they would want?
Natural resources and a big military is the leverage that they have. So he's like, well, they should just get rid of that and become a state.
They should just get rid of that and
has a strong tech sector.
Yeah. Look at
what?
Like, it's like, hey, you know the country that just abused you and like gave everyone HIV and crashed your standard of living by like a fourth? Don't have the things they have.
No.
Don't have a giant military, natural resources. Do not, under any circumstances, you do not want that.
Projecting military influence on your neighbors? Do not do that.
Yeah.
Look inward.
Reminds me of my favorite T.I. song, Be Better Than Me.
It does. It is. It's basically exactly what Bill Clinton said to the industrial workforce of America after NAFTA passed. Like, you guys go back to school, learn coding, and to basically find an entirely different set of values that don't involve asking for any fucking money or power or influence over anything.
That's called creating a modern economy based on human talent in science, technology, and the arts. So yeah,
similar thing. Yeah, similar thing of like looking at those people who you said learn to code to. Was just like, oh, it's weird. There's just like these tens of millions of people who will never vote again.
Yeah,
this is so weird. Who did this?
I think they should seek to cultivate talents in the arts.
Yeah, no, there should have been.
Country.
Yeah, no, if Bill Clinton had been a more proactive president, if the role of government wasn't diminished in American life, he could have sent all those former coal miners and guys building washing machines. He could have sent them to NYU, and they could have gone to the Tisch School of the Performing Arts.
That's so awesome too, because like arts, like actually making like an economy out of art shit. That's just already where money is. You don't make money from that. Like people with like artistic talent move towards concentrations of wealth that already exist. You don't just make one out of thin air when your country is experiencing, yes, a massive decline in standard of living.
Yeah, no, I mean, like the idea of like a Russian tech sector in the 90s, you think about like what fueled the American tech sector. It's like, oh, why don't you guys just like have decades of public-private research and then an explosion in development undergirded by incredibly cheap money.
Also, all of which was initially military spending, which you're not supposed to do.
Yeah.
Read Red Plenty for some interesting insights on the Russian computer sector in the 1950s.
He continues, I did everything I could to help Russia make the right choice and become a great 21st century democracy. My first trip outside the United States as president was to Vancouver to meet with Yeltsin and guarantee $1.6 billion for Russia so it could afford to bring its soldiers home from the Baltic states and provide for their housing.
I bet that conversation went great. Yeltsin was wearing a barrel of suspenders, and every time he got up, you saw his balls. And if you looked at his notepad of what he was talking about with Clinton, it was just like a pink elephant playing the trumpet. What a great meeting. I'm sure he took a lot away from it. If this is him, his tenure in foreign policy in Russia, if that was him trying his best to bring them into the 21st century, I would hate to see what treating them poorly would look like.
Yeah.
Skipping ahead a little bit. In 1997, we supported the NATO-Russia Founding Act, which gave Russia a voice but not a veto in NATO affairs, and supported Russia's entry into the G7, making it the G8. In 1999, at the end of the Kosovo conflict, Defense Secretary Bill Cohen reached an agreement with the Russian defense minister under which Russian troops could join UN-sanctioned NATO peacekeeping forces. Throughout it all, we left the door open for Russia's eventual membership in NATO, something I made clear to Yeltsin and later confirmed to his successor, Vladimir Putin. In addition to all these efforts to involve Russia in NATO's post-Cold War missions, Albright and our entire national security team worked hard to promote positive bilateral relations. Vice President Al Gore co-chaired a commission with Russian Prime Minister Viktor Chernomyrdin to address issues of mutual interest. We agreed to destroy 34 tons of weapons-grade plutonium each. We also agreed to pull Russian, European, and NATO conventional forces back from borders, though Putin declined to go ahead with the plan when he assumed the Russian presidency in 2000. Just a quick digression here about those 34 tons of weapons-grade plutonium. I don't know if you guys have seen this story, but have you seen the bit about how Russian soldiers are just taking shit from Chernobyl and like glowing rocks, and they're just like, I don't know, moving them around with their hands or like keeping them as souvenirs, or like they're just like, because like when they were stationed in Chernobyl, they were just like driving jeeps through what's known as the Red Forest and kicking up like tons of fucking irradiated dust in the air. But there was this one guy who was apparently like a Russian soldier who was like, hey, what's this? Cool. And picked up a rock of like pure cobalt 60 or something like that.
Well, okay, that's
very grim to think about.
Look, it is never too late to change course. It is never too late to change your life. Take that real estate class, go to coding school, to go to NYU maybe. It's never too late. Even for Russia, who they're finally going to have the non-military, non-nationalistic, non-natural resources sector of the economy that Bill Clinton was asking for. You can go and experience the game Fallout in real life all over Russia now.
I just liked having just a little souvenir, a little souvenir from my time in Ukraine.
I can't wait for the Russian X-Men. There's going to be like their Professor X is just like a guy who knows the most racist thing to call every person he knows, even without speaking their language. A guy who can withstand any motorcycle crash. The greatest heroes ever foretold.
I'll have you know there already is a Russian X-Man. His name is Colossus.
Well, that Colossus had, this is a major digression, but my favorite thing in 70s X-Men, when just like everyone was on the shittiest coke and weed of all time, just like dirt weed and like bright yellow coke. There was a storyline where the Doctor Strange takes the X-Men to hell and Colossus is there and he's like, well, look how bad this is. If you fuck up once, you're tortured forever. This is why I'm glad I'm an atheist. It's like, but you're like seeing hell. Man, they did awesome shit back then.
He goes, all told, I met with Yeltsin 18 times and Putin 5 times. Twice when he was Yeltsin's prime minister and 3 times in the 10-plus months that our terms as president overlapped. That's just 3 short of all the U.S.-USSR leaders' meetings from 1943 through 1991. The idea that we ignored, disrespected, or tried to isolate Russia is false. Yes, NATO expanded despite Russia's objections, but expansion was about more than the U.S. relationship with Russia. When my administration started in 1993, no one felt certain that a post-Cold War Europe would remain peaceful, stable, and democratic. Big questions remained about East Germany's integration with West Germany, whether old conflicts would explode across the continent as they did in the Balkans, and how former Warsaw Pact nations and newly independent Soviet republics would seek security, not just against the threat of Russian invasion, but from one another and from conflicts within their borders. The possibility of EU and NATO membership provided the greatest incentives for Central and Eastern European states to invest in political and economic reforms and abandon a go-it-alone strategy of militarization. Neither the EU nor NATO could stay within the borders Stalin had imposed in 1945. Many countries that had been behind the Iron Curtain were seeking greater freedom and prosperity and security with the EU and NATO. Under inspiring leaders such as Václav Havel in the Czech Republic, Lech Walesa in Poland, and yes, a young pro-democracy Viktor Orban in Hungary, thousands of everyday citizens crowded the streets of Prague, Warsaw, Budapest, Bucharest, Sofia, and beyond whenever I spoke there. He's just bragging about the crowds he got in Hungary. As Carl Bildt, the former Swedish prime minister and foreign minister, tweeted in December 2021, it wasn't NATO seeking to go east. It was former Soviet satellites and republics wishing to go west. I mean, like that. That's their.
I don't know why people call NATO an extortion racket. It is, yeah. I wonder if they looked east and were like, "Oh my God, holy shit, we need to get on our knees."
And it's like, despite it being their wish to go west, it's like America is the West, and we get to decide who's in and out of the club. So
yeah, like what are we gonna do? These poor little Eastern European countries.
They wanted to join.
What were we gonna do? Say no? Like when the Soviets asked in the 50s? No.
But Poland could never be a made guy because his mom was a bunch of Turks and Mongols, and his dad was a regular white person. So they could be good earners, but the second they go into a country that uses normal letters, they're put on a chain gang and forced to clean toilets. But they get to be in NATO.
Enlarging NATO required unanimous consent of the alliance's then 16 members, 2/3 consent of a sometimes skeptical U.S. Senate, close consultation with prospective members to ensure that their military, economic, and political reforms met NATO's high standards, and near constant reassurance to Russia. Madeleine Albright excelled at every step. Indeed, few diplomats have ever been so perfectly suited for the times they served as Madeleine. As a child in war-torn Europe, Madeleine and her family were twice forced to flee their home, first by Hitler, then by Stalin. She understood that the end of the Cold War provided the chance to build Europe a free, united, and prosperous to build a Europe free, united, prosperous, and secure for the first time since nation-states arose on the continent. As UN Ambassador and Secretary of State, she worked to realize that vision and to beat back the religious, ethnic, and other tribal divisions that threatened it. What was that when she yelled, Serb pigs, don't touch me? What was that when she screamed at Serbian people at a press conference or something?
Yeah, she said, dirty Serbs, get out.
Dirty Serbs, yeah.
Yeah, I want to go back a little bit to the high standards of NATO. As we like to say, that is certainly one way to put it.
Like what are the high standards here? They're like to join NATO.
The SIG high standards of NATO. Like Jesus fucking Christ. You know, I as we have said, I think it's like incredibly unfair and ugly to seriously say that you know the average Ukrainian is a Nazi, even though there is a problem with like Nazi armed groups in the country. To say that average Ukrainians are Nazis is ridiculous. It's wrong. It, you know, in the worst case, if it, you know, has any institutional or national power behind that sentiment, it makes those Nazi groups more powerful. This is absolutely fair to say about Lithuania, though, which is a NATO state. This is 100% fair to say about the nation of Lithuania. I'm sorry.
The result has been more than 2 decades of peace and prosperity for an ever larger portion of Europe and a strengthening of our collective security. Per capita GDPs have more than tripled in the Czech Republic, Hungary, and Poland. All 3 countries have participated in a variety of NATO missions since joining, including the peacekeeping force in Kosovo. To date, no member state of our defensive alliance has been invaded. Indeed, even in the early years after the fall of the Iron Curtain, the mere prospect of NATO membership helped cool long-simmering disputes between Poland, Lithuania, Hungary, and Romania, and others. Now, Russia's unprovoked and unjustified invasion of Ukraine, far from casting the wisdom of NATO expansion into doubt, proves that this policy was necessary. Russia under Putin clearly would not have been a content status quo power in the absence of expansion. It wasn't an immediate likelihood of Ukraine joining NATO that led Putin to invade Ukraine twice, in 2004 and in February, but rather the country's shift toward democracy that threatened his autocratic power at home, and a desire to control the valuable assets beneath Ukrainian soil. And it is the strength of the NATO alliance and its credible threat of defensive force that has prevented Putin from menacing members from the Baltics to Eastern Europe. As The Atlantic's Ann Applebaum said recently,
oh, hell yeah, bring it.
The expansion of NATO was the most successful, if not the only truly successful piece of American foreign policy of the last 30 years. We would be having this fight in East Germany right now if we hadn't done it. So it's, yeah, like I like that Ann Applebaum is saying that the expansion of NATO is the only successful Western foreign policy initiative of the last 30 years, most of which she was also the author of. So she's like, I'm still banking on this.
The intentions were good, okay? That's what we need to know. Even if everything goes wrong, it's not, and even though we are the most powerful country on earth and presumably have some sort of say on the outcome, it's never our fault.
Well, I mean, this is why people are sort of twisting themselves into knots with this kind of absurd position that the weaker than in any time in the last 150, 200 years, the Western left caused the invasion of Ukraine somehow through posts and blogs. You kind of have to say that because otherwise it sort of rings bare that anything happening in Ukraine, absolutely the onus is on Russia, but it's also an immense failure of a policy of provocation and expansion. So you have to say just this like insane shit that accounts with 30,000 followers emboldened Putin to act.
The failure of Russian democracy and its turn to revanchism was not catalyzed in Brussels at NATO headquarters. It was decided in Moscow by Putin. He could have used Russia's prodigious skills in information technology to create a competitor for Silicon Valley and build a strong, diversified.
I'm sure
economy.
we would have welcomed that, certainly. A competitor for Silicon Valley? Absolutely. We love it. America, we love a little global competition over IP. Oh my God. It's our favorite thing.
What the fuck are we talking about? Like, if Russia built something similar to the iPhone, they would have flattened St. Petersburg. Jesus fucking Christ! Fucking Steve Jobs, they would have grafted his head onto a mech and fucking launched suitcase nukes all over the fucking country. What are you talking about? Jesus Christ!
Wait.
I know he's a former president. They have to run it, but like this is insane. This is like just like print the goatsy guy. What the fuck is this?
Wait, I mean, like, look, they could have invested. I mean, like, what they did do was invest in, all their oil and the sort of natural resources and building up their gigantic military. But what if they used all of those creative, productive forces to create a competitor with the U.S. dollar as the global reserve currency? Like, what? It's like they could have had peace and prosperity. They could have been growing their economy. People wouldn't be drinking gasoline over there. They wouldn't be trying to take. They wouldn't be trying to take home pieces of irradiated Chernobyl nuclear power plant to just I don't know, have it next to their dashboard camera when they crash a car into a fucking dam or something.
Yeah, it would be like if Russia created like a serious global competitor to Facebook, you would be killed for accessing it on an iPhone. Like it would just zap you. You couldn't do it. Like if in the 90s they had somehow created like a regional competitor to Kinko's, we would have invaded. Like what are we talking about here?
Skipping ahead a little bit, he says, my last conversation with Madeleine Albright was just 2 weeks before she died. She was vintage Madeleine, sharp and direct. It was clear she wanted to go out with her boots on, supporting the Ukrainians in their fight for freedom and independence. She wanted to go fight. Her and Sean Penn. She was booking a plane ticket with Sean Penn. She was like, Sean, we're going to the front lines.
I wish someone had fulfilled her request earlier. They should have sent her over there in 2014. They could have used a helping hand at Donbass.
On her declining health, she said, I've got good care. I'm doing what I can. Let's not waste time on that. The important thing is what kind of world we're going to leave our grandchildren. Madeleine saw her lifelong fight for democracy and security as both an obligation and an opportunity. She was proud of her Czech heritage and certain that her people and their neighbors in Central and Eastern Europe would defend their freedom, because they know the price of losing freedom. She was right about NATO when I was president and right about Ukraine now. I miss her so much, but I can still hear her voice. So should we all. That's not Madeleine's voice, Bill. That's the voice of someone who's just like, in a cage in your basement going, please, let me out. Let me out. I want freedom and security, please. I want freedom. It's like, Madeleine, I can still hear your voice coming through the air ducts of this mansion. Yeah. So, yeah, that's Bill Clinton on former President Bill Clinton on NATO extension. He did nothing wrong, folks. I mean, he was right then and he's right now.
Never been wrong about a thing. Choice of friends, anything.
That is very, very similar to Albert Fish's letters to the victim, victim's parents. That is sort of a similar deal there. Similar men too, actually.
It's true. We just have these these guys who get to be public serial killers for 4 or 8 years, and then they just get to hang around and taunt their victims afterwards.
God damn it. Oh my God.
It's like George W. Bush's paintings of all the troops that were injured in Iraq. Mm. I'm drawing this one as a clown, and here's me also as a clown.